And Director DeBruler is joining us a little late tonight, and Director Hardy has sent his regrets tonight, as well as Director Strauss, Vice President Strauss. So we will begin the conference. Dr. Watts, if you'd like to begin.
Yes, thank you. President Mengadassalam, members of the board, staff, and our state auditing team, as well as community and friends, I would like to thank each and every one of you for being here this evening for our special meeting in support of our Exit Audit Conference for Kent School District. And as we begin this session, we'll obviously have an opportunity to introduce, and I would also like to pay special attention and tribute to our business services and budget finance team from our organizational effectiveness community, so led by Dr. Jewel Harmon, and technical expertise from our team led by Ben Rarick. And Ben, I'm going to turn the meeting over to you. I'm sorry. It's okay. Sorry. Can you smell it? Pass it. Before we actually begin officially, give everyone an opportunity to introduce themselves so we know who's at the table.
Well, I'm Brandon Tecca. I'm the assistant manager on the audit. I reviewed most of the work and also did some of the sections.
I'm Sandra Broshon. I'm the audit manager of our South King County team that's located in Kent.
Mark Raposo, assistant director for the audit, local audit services. I've been with the office for 36 years now this month, and thank you for inviting us here today to share with you the results of our audit.
Melissa Larby, I'm the Director of Communications and
Jewel Harmon, Chief Accountability Officer.
Ben Rarick, Executive Director of Budget and Finance.
Austin Freeman, Student Representative to the school board.
Denise Daniels, and I apologize. I just want to because I'm at about 6:15. I have to leave. So just put it out there so you guys know. So apologies for that. Oh, hey, that works too.
Maya Vengadassalam, current board president.
Calvin Watts, superintendent. Floor is yours.
Okay, well, thank you for inviting us here again tonight to share with you the results of a couple of our audits, the most recent audits of the Kent School District. Sandra Broshon, the audit manager, was responsible for the audit, and Brandon Tecca was the auditor in charge. We conducted most of the field work. Of course, I'm the assistant director of surveyor that I'm responsible for this team, as well as the other teams in Seattle and Bellevue and Tacoma, and also the schools team that audits, coordinates the school audit statewide. So with that, I'll just turn it over to Sandra to get this thing started.
So in your packets on the left-hand side, you have an exit conference agenda, and this is going to walk you through each of the key points and areas that we're going to talk about. And to start, the main two things we want to share with you today are your draft audit reports. So you'll be receiving two reports as a result of our audit. The first is accountability audit, and that is for the period September 1st, 2016 through August 31st, 2018. And the next is the financial statement and federal grant compliance report for the one-year period of September 17 through August 31st, 2018. You'll notice the accountability audit period is 2 years this year. And the reason for that is that last year we started the accountability audit, and before we finished the audit, we had some citizen concerns come up. We wanted to make sure to include those in our audit. And so to do that, we made the accountability audit be 2 years so we can make sure we captured those areas and looked into those things as part of our accountability audit. So first, I would like to walk you through the accountability audit report. And if you have any questions as we go through that, feel free to just let me know. I'm happy to get more explanation or information if that is helpful. Yeah, so on the right-hand side of your packet, on the top document is your accountability audit report. If you flip back to the first page there, this is an introductory letter from our state auditor, Pat McCarthy, kind of introducing the report and what it's about, and talks a little bit about our office and the service that we provide. And we're an independent auditor. We're here to help report on stewardship of public resources and transparency. The next page, page 3, is your table of contents and lists out each of the areas in the audit report. And page 4 is the kind of meat and potatoes, I guess, of the accountability report. That lays out your audit results. The first paragraph, the second sentence, is your results, and in the areas that we selected, we found that district operations complied with applicable state laws, regulations, and its own policies, and provided adequate controls over safeguarding of public resources. So we didn't have any findings or management letters in your accountability areas that we looked at. You know, we take a risk-based approach on our audit work, so we don't look at everything, but in the areas that we looked at, the district had adequate controls and policies and procedures in the areas we reviewed.
Sandra, if we have
Yes.
questions, do we do them as we go, or should we?
Either way, whatever.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
So this is the accountability audit portion.
Mm-hmm.
That includes all of the questions about transfers in and out of the capital projects fund?
No, those are also part of the financial
Okay.
statement
Right.
report. So you'll see at the bottom of the page, there's some bulleted items, and this is a list of the areas that we looked at. So we looked at transfers out of the capital project fund, financial condition and fiscal sustainability, compliance. I won't read through all of them, but another of the areas that we looked at was compliance with state law over the timing of change orders related to a public works project. We looked at enrollment in several different areas. And then ASB activities, we usually do some analysis of revenues and expenditures in the ASB areas, and we'll take a look at fundraisers, cash receipting practices, cash handling practices, policies, things like that. And over the past 2-year period, we looked at Meridian Middle School, Kentwood High School, and Kent Ridge High School. And we also looked at student store cash receipting at the 2 high schools. We did some work on IT security policies and procedures and your financial systems. And procurement, we looked at competitive bidding purchases and cooperative purchases, which is a statewide theme, the cooperative purchasing. We looked at that at all of the districts around the state. And then self-insurance, we're required to look at by our CW, and so we looked at that as well. Page 5, this page refers to your financial statement and federal grant program. So if someone were to just pick up this report, they would know there's this other report out there that speaks to the financial and federal grant programs. And page 6 of the document is information about the district. This pretty much, it carries forward from one year to the next and gets updated with current information. So this should be your most current information about the district. And that is about all we have for our accountability audit report. Are there any questions?
I was just going to add on to say that the transfers are also mentioned in the accountability report, because in the financial statement, we approach them from a financial statement audit perspective where we look at allowability of those items, but there was additional citizen concerns related to other items that weren't as appropriately classified as financial statement items, so we addressed those or considered those to be accountability audit related. I will go over the financial statement audit report with you. Financial single. All right, on the first page, we have the scope of the audit. So this is the audit report for the 2017-2018 school year. We again have communication from Pat McCarthy. As you'll note, this is preliminary draft. As we prepare to publish this, the page numbers get populated on the document and in the table of contents. The schedule of findings and question costs. This is purely a summary document that's only included when there's a single audit. This has the results of our financial and single audits. However, I'm going to go through each of those audits with you separately, and so to not repeat the information here and then as a second time in the audit report. What this document has as unique information, though, is that it lists the identification of major federal programs. On the second page, it shows all the major programs that we audited. On the next page, we have your summary schedule of prior audit findings. Last year had a finding over Title I related to paraprofessionals. So this is a required document that gets included anytime to follow up on a finding. We note on this near the bottom, status of corrective action, that we've identified this as fully corrected. It's also worth noting that the specific compliance requirement that led to this finding is no longer a compliance requirement that we audit. It may still be required as part of the program, but it's not one that gets selected for audit purposes. All right, next on the right, we have your independent auditor's report on internal control, compliance, and other matters. This is essentially your financial statement internal control report. The purpose of this report is to describe the scope of our testing over internal control, compliance, and other matters, again for the financial statement. Our procedures did not identify significant matters other than those identified in the management letter, which are referenced in this report. Again, we don't include the management letter here, but it is referenced in this document. We also note that we do not give an official audit opinion on these specific matters because our procedures aren't designed for that purpose. So again, we looked at internal control, compliance, and other matters, and we note no significant deficiencies or material weakness. On the second page of the report, the sentence above compliance and other matters, that's the one sentence that references that there was a management letter. We noted certain matters that we will report to management of the district in a separate letter dated today. Turning the page to the next blue summary, the blue title at the top, where we have independent auditor's report on compliance for each major federal program. This is your single audit report for both compliance and the opinion. The first page just discusses management and the auditor's responsibility in relation to your single audit. The most important paragraph on the next page is under opinion on each matter for federal program. And we state that this is our highest level of assurance that, in our opinion, the district complied in all material respects with the type of compliance requirements referred to above that could have a direct and material impact. And that's saying that we don't audit every single compliance requirement. We pick the ones that have a significant amount of dollars associated with those, and we audit those. This report also contains that same discussion of the scope of our work in relation to internal controls. It may be worth noting that when doing single audit work, we have to perform that work to a higher standard. But even though we're doing additional internal control work, we don't give an opinion on internal control, just the opinion on the major federal programs. Turning the page again, your independent auditor's report on financial statements. This is where your financial opinion is stated. We again state management's responsibility and auditor's responsibility in relation to performing this engagement. On the next page, we have your unmodified opinion on your regulatory basis of accounting. It's the school district prepares financial statements under OSPI's regulatory basis of accounting, and we audit to that regulatory basis of accounting, and this is our highest level of assurance for that basis, and that's to say that in our opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the Kent School District. Required by auditing standards is to note in the next 2 paragraphs that the financial statements, your F-196 financial statements, were not intended to receive a GAAP opinion, and as such, they do not fairly present under a GAAP basis. And we note under the basis of opinion that the major reason that you receive an adverse GAAP opinion is that you don't prepare government-wide financial statements which combine every fund into a single column. So that entire financial statement's missing essentially, which is considered to be material. But again, the F-196 statements aren't intended to fairly present GAAP.
So just to clarify then, for 290 school districts across the state, the same language appears.
Yes, this is a boilerplate language that applies for every school district that prepares the F-196. Lastly is just the financial statements, or the financial section, and this just lists the schedules we're going to attach. You may review a full F-196, which may be several hundred pages and has a number of different documents and programs. Our financial audit report is just over these schedules listed in the summary. And on the last page, more information about the State Auditor's Office. So next on the right, you'll find our management letter. This is the letter referenced in the internal control report. Water. So the first topic is the transfers out of the capital project fund. The transfers out of the capital project fund were communicated to our office as a matter of public concern. Management letters may typically report on non-compliance or other issues. This, however, is communicated in a management letter not as non-compliance, but to communicate the results of our work and officially recognize and comment on this matter. The first paragraph talks about the RCW state law references. It establishes the capital project fund, and it uses the very specific language of saying that school districts shall make this transfer. It does not say may or could. It very specifically says the school district shall make this transfer, and that OSPI is responsible for creating those accounting guidelines. So in review of those accounting guidelines, we looked at the 2017-2018 School District Accounting Manual. We importantly note that is the applicable manual for the audit period. We note 2 chapters in particular, Chapter 2, over budgeting, and Chapter 3, accounting guidelines, and I can touch on some matters related to those. In reference to, let me get my page. In reference to the budget document, it says transfers which are self-balancing must be included when applicable. So the first question is, how do you determine when it is applicable? And so our procedures were then to go to the section over transfers. There's a specific section over interfund activity. And in reviewing the section over interfund activity, we note that there's 3 discussions of different types of transfers, each noted with a bullet point. Under each bullet point, it very specifically says, repeated again for each line, that these transfers must be authorized by board approval. The 4th bullet point does not repeat that language, and the legal interpretation of that is not to assume that that's either a typo or a mistake or some type of accidental omission. That by putting, again, reviewing Chapter 2, which says when applicable, and going to Chapter 3 and determining when it would become applicable, We don't interpret that fourth bullet point, again, as an omission, that a specific board approval was not required. We also note that it's possible, there isn't an authoritative answer on this that I identified, but it's also possible that the official board action authorizing the tech levy may authorize the prescribed journal entries that go with that tech levy. Again, the RCW says you shall make this transfer, not may. And as this happens, the expenditures have been transferred. This expenditure, or this transfer also it's not a true type of transfer where unassigned or unobligated fund balance is being taken one fund and assigned to another. Because the district has the tech levy, there's additional technology expenditures out of the general fund. The revenues related to those planned expenditures go into the capital project fund, and in substance, this transfer has qualities of a reimbursement. Again, it's not taking unassigned, unobligated, unplanned for fund balance and moving it somewhere else.
Correct, it's the other way around, revenue from capital. Okay.
Yes, my apologies. We also note that this practice was discussed with the board during the October 17th board meeting. Some of those journal entries had already been made, but all of the journal entries relating to that transfer had not been complete. We note in reviewing that videotape that there was no perceived issue with that. There was no, at least from watching the video, there was no noted concern or disagreement. Likely because it may make sense, again, to align the revenues and the expenditures into the same fund. You shall do this. We also note in the May 22nd board meeting, resolution number 1556, which officially recognizes the practice and officially recognizes that began in the prior year. We note that was approved by all board members who are present. What may be an even greater question of importance is whether these expenditures or whether these transfers truly represented allowable capital project fund uses. And we audit the amount of $3.6 million, which was the full amount of transfers noted in the financial statements. In auditing those to a very high degree of certainty, I identified no dollars that were unallowable. These were allowable capital project funds. And our recommendation is to continue to follow the school district accounting manual. I may have skipped a small paragraph. We do recognize that the 2019-2020 school district accounting manual has taken out those references for each of the bullet points and made a generic reference in the paragraph. We, however, do not audit to a future accounting manual. We select the one that applies to our school year.
I just want to add to that. We didn't take this lightly. We looked at the nuances of how the guidance was structured as far as the first three transfers referenced specifically the audit resolutions, whereas the ones for tech levy did not. We polled our members on the school accounting committee, our school specialists, if you will, and asked them what their thoughts were on that, and they said it was unclear. And so then we approached our legal counsel and ran the same information as far as our interpretation, our understanding of how the construction of this guidance. And the interpretation, the guidance from our inside legal was that it's unclear. So going with that, we looked at the guidance that was there for the 17-18 school year and determined that the transfer did require board approval. And moving forward with the adjustments that were made to the guidance to clarify that if you look at the construction of the new guidance, taken all of those bullets and moved it up to an overarching paragraph. So that so that's kind of how we ended up where we ended up with our determinations on this.
Board members, do you have any questions about what you're hearing?
I Oh, no, I was gonna say, I don't. Pretty clear.
Yep, it is.
It's
I had
quite
two more
clear.
items to add, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, yeah.
It's also very important that whether or not the transfer should be officially authorized by our board approval, it's still, the fund is still held accountable to its overall budget appropriations, and even when adding in this additional 3.6 million, the budgeted appropriations of the capital project fund were not exceeded. Also, there was discussion of whether or not that this could have been done to avoid binding condition. It's very important to note that binding condition is based on the budgeting process. You take your current planned revenues, add your fund balance, and those should be greater than planned expenditures. And it's through not being able to produce a budget at that point that may lead to binding conditions. The initial budget, or the budget, did not result in binding conditions. We met with someone at OSPI. Also,
The ESD.
I'm sorry, the ESD. And in terms of binding condition, those $3.6 million were not even in the budget. They weren't budgeted expenditures in the initial budget, and so they couldn't have helped avoid that process because they weren't there at all. Also, it's to be noted that this is a budgeting process. Budgeting is based on your best projections, your best estimate. They should be reasonable, and there's other criteria. But if something happens where your planned expenditures or revenues don't turn out how you anticipated, then you would not take those differences and apply them to a budget that was determined 6 months ago to retroactively apply binding conditions. If a district were to be aware of certain expenditures or certain differences from the budget, then at that time they could cut expenditures. You can't just retroactively reduce those from the budget. So, any questions on the?
As long as the board members understand with clarity what you were just told.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, next, in the management letter, we have payroll costs funded by the capital project funds. This is a very common issue that entities have. It's allowable and reasonable that part of someone's duties would relate to restricted funds, and the district or entity comes up with an allocation to say take 20% or 15% or whatever the appropriate percent is. And part of that salary is paid by one fund and part of it is paid by another fund. We reviewed the payroll cost allocations for 6 employers. In reviewing those percentages, we met with Ben and discussed the process by which those percentages were made, such as reviewing calendar appointments, reviewing job duties, having discussions with staff. Based on our understanding of the audit, based on known capital project activity, based on the duties that those staff would be performing that are, clearly related to capital project fund uses, we don't question the percents. We do, however, note it here and include it in the management letter because of the documentation related to those percentages. As we come into an audit, we should be able to very clearly see exactly what months, ideally what dates, and be able to look at a document that clearly lays out the months, dates, and all of the procedures that were used to come to that calculation. We note that that wasn't present, but the district has said that in the future that will be a standard practice.
Can I ask a question on that?
Yes.
So making the distinction between the allowability of the expenses themselves versus the process of documenting those expenses.
Yes.
In essence, what you're saying is you found nothing as to the allowability of the funding or the reasonableness of the actual use of the dollars, but you're noting an issue as to the documentation.
Yes.
Do you understand? Does everybody got that?
Understood.
Yes.
Next, we have revenue recognition of property tax. This is a rather complicated area. This is a little bit hard to digest. So this is the 17-18 audit. In 16-17, the district, it was the district's first year preparing for audit. F-196 financial statements, the district had previously produced GAAP statements. GAAP allows a 60-day treatment or counting of property tax. The F-196 in 2015. I understand this is confusing, but it's just to describe
Be clear.
describe the
Absolutely.
process. In 15-16, the F-196 also allowed 30 days of accrual. In 16-17, the first year the district went to the F-196, it was the first year that that accrual was unallowable. So, unallowable.
Right.
Yes, so that's just to say that the property taxes between these different bases of accountings have had a lot of change, that it's a confusing topic, or could be considered to be. For this audit, we note that the district had accrued, which means your fiscal year ends August 31st. And the district counted property tax collections in September following fiscal year end as current period revenue. We call that an accrual, again, which is allowable under GAAP and had previously been allowable for the F-196. For the year of audit, it was no longer allowable. And so we have proposed the correction that the district undo that journal entry, which reduced ending fund balance by the September property tax collections after fiscal year end. The district has made that correction.
So in essence, that money, that revenue comes out of 17-18, goes into 18-19. That's September.
Yes, yes. But regardless of when it hits the bank account, it still hits the bank account at the same time. This is really a question of what 12 months are you going to count? You still get the money at the same time, it's still available at the same time. It's just on what financial report are you going to put that specific dollars?
I can add to that too, on a statewide perspective, this issue of revenue recognition for property taxes has been an ongoing issue for at least 3 years, where, GAAP prescribes like up to 60 days of accrual. Well, schools in the state of Washington have the choice of going GAAP or regulatory basis. So this is focusing on the F-196 regulatory basis. And statewide, schools have been unsuccessful in capturing the correct recognition of property taxes. So it went from a 60-day from 3 years ago to, let's try 30 days. And a lot of that is it varies with each county. Some counties can give you the property taxes within 24 hours in your bank account. Other counties take a month. Some could take a little longer. So it went from 60 to 30 down to 0, all in a short period of time. So that's kind of like the history and the background, and also it's been a statewide issue and a struggle for us. So we worked with the school district accounting committee to provide our input into OSPI and the proposed changes to the school district accounting manual for this. And so again, we proposed 30 days, now we're down to 0.
Also, this property tax error is $700,000 approximately in comparison to over $340 million of revenue. And so we don't evaluate this as being material. It's less than, it's 0.2% of the general fund's revenue. It does also impact the capital project and debt service fund, but even less so than it does the general fund. And this has been corrected. It is in your audited financial report and gets corrected to or through OSPI also. Questions before we move on to the management audit?
Might be going back to also the previous accountability audit. Just a question, general question about school districts and internal auditors. Asked the question separately in years past about having an internal auditor in place to oversee some of the not necessarily the findings, the management letter items. And we were told that it's very unusual in our state to have a internal control individual. Is that correct, or do you see that as
That's correct.
problematic?
And you'll see internal auditors in Tacoma School District, Seattle School District. Not sure about Spokane, but the fairly large ones, it doesn't see those in every school district.
And do you feel like it's a issue of concern that's come up with other
The concern
School
about
districts.
not having an internal auditor, it's nice to always have an internal auditor, it's just like an independent external audit, but that comes with a price tag. So, where do you place that priority?
Okay, thank you.
I think the school district accounting manual even says that the control should be proportionate to the thing it's protecting. And so what are the risks that you've identified in your risk assessment process in comparison to, again, the price tag of the internal auditor and their ability to find and possibly correct those errors? Any other questions before I move on with the exit document?
And what did you say that last year was the 30 days was allowed in 196? You mentioned it didn't get it.
So in 2015-16, it was 30 days. So 16-17 was the first year it went to 0, which was also the first year the district went to the F-196 for audit. Now, since we're on the subject of financial statements, just jumping to the bottom of the exit conference document, there's 2 communications required by audit standards. That's that your audited financial report has no uncorrected misstatements, and also that there were no material misstatements that were corrected. Under exit items, we also have exit items that have been provided at the department level. Those get followed up on the next audit. For audit highlights, we thank Ben Rorick, Executive Director of Budget and Finance, and district staff for providing timely audit responses and communication during the audit.
If you flip back to your agenda that we started on and turn to the second page, we've got some concluding items to go over. So report publication is the first here, as Brandon had mentioned, and I think I did too. Both of the reports are draft. The financial statement, single audit report, needs to go out by the end of the month to meet your federal deadline. So I anticipate that to go out, I believe, on Thursday, and we'll have to complete the data collection form and all of that on Thursday, once it's released. Actually, we might be able to do it tomorrow possibly. So, but we'll get that completed by Thursday as well. And the accountability report might go out by the end of this week, but it might not make it out until next week, which is fine. We're still able to meet your federal deadline. So those are both draft. They'll be released either this week, financial, federal, or next week for accountability. And those will be available online to you when they're published. Management representation letter we get at the end of each audit, and we've provided a copy in here if you wanted to look at it. It lists out all the representations that management makes as part of the audit. So that's provided here for you if you would like to take a look at it. Our audit costs, at the beginning of the audit in our engagement letter, we estimated the cost of the audit to be approximately $75,000. Our actual audit costs are slightly higher by approximately $18,000. These additional costs are as a result of the additional work that was required to adequately address public concerns. So our costs are slightly higher to make sure we got all of those concerns addressed appropriately. Your next scheduled audit, we should be out approximately December January timeframe to get started on your next audit. It will include all the same areas that we looked at this year. We'll have a one-year accountability audit, though, is what we anticipate, and then a one-year financial statement and federal audit over the 2018-19 school year. And the estimated cost for your next audit, we don't anticipate any additional costs, so it should be in the $75,000 estimate for that as well. Also, at the conclusion of our audit, once we get back to the office and wrap everything up, we mentioned earlier that we had some citizen concerns that were brought to our attention, and as part of our process, after we've communicated our audit results with you, we'll send a letter out to each of the citizens to let them know what our results were and the work that we did regarding their concerns. So those will be going out shortly as well.
Okay, thank you.
And then just a couple more topics here. Audit survey, at the end of the audit, when the reports get published, it'll trigger surveys to be sent out to a few folks. If you get a survey and you're able to fill it out, that would be great. We really value your input and feedback. We're always trying to improve our processes, so if there's things we can do better, we like to hear about that, or if there are things that went really well, we like to hear about that too. So if you get a survey, please fill it out if you are able. We have a local government support team that provides technical assistance to our audit clients. They are really good at answering technical questions. You can just jump online, send a help desk request, and they have really good turnaround, usually about 24-hour response time. It's a free service that we provide, so it's a great resource for you, so we want to make sure you're aware of that. And then we also have the Center for Government Innovation, and it's also another free service that our office provides. They have a lot, if you go to our website and go to the Center for Government Innovation, they have a lot of, and they're always adding to it, but a lot of tools and resources for our local governments, checklists for when you're preparing financial statements, or information about capital assets and best practices, some policy guidance. There's all kinds of different information that they are trying to get out to our local governments, so you guys don't have to reinvent the wheel all the time when you have a place to go to find some best practice and have some tools. And then the last page is our contact information. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to any of the three of us, or Kelly Collins is our Director of Local Audit. Her contact information is here as well, so feel free to let us know if you have any questions, either now or anytime, anytime. We want to be a resource to you throughout the year, not just when we're here.
We've started to take advantage of those resources, so I know that your team and Ryan went to Waco and presented the internal control self-assessment instrument, and so we're actually implementing that in the district. We've scheduled a series of meetings to kind of use that tool. We have a lot of new staff, so that's one of the examples of the materials that you're providing that we're working in. I just want to say before we wrap up here that appreciate which has been truly a different sort of audit with all the external input, allegations of fraud and so forth, and just really pleased that we have an audit with no findings. And I want to appreciate the work that you put into this, and thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Yes, and I also want to say thank you. I know there have been numerous phone calls and a lot of time we've spent over the phone going over all of this, and I thank you for always returning our calls and answering our questions. So.
Well, please.
No, I'm good. No, I'm agreeing with everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I know we are part of this important and necessary process. Our goal is obviously to do our best to ensure public trust is sustained, maintained, and if we've done anything that is perceived or real, to improve. And I think this process does certainly help us, all of us, including our general public, to ensure we're taking care of our public two most precious resources, their children and our taxpayers' dollars. So we do thank you for your time, your effort. It's taken a great deal of time, certainly. But we appreciate everything you've done for us and the continued offering of support. It's much appreciated. Thank you.
All right. If there are no more questions, then we are adjourned. Thank you so much for coming. Have a good evening.
No, you don't need to. Okay, so you got your talk. Okay. Okay.
I was like, that must be what she told me like a couple months ago. She didn't say anything.
Yeah, I was blessed with a couple of amazing opportunities.
I went to get some water in my
appreciate that.
So I was looking at it, because I marked up my